Sophie, what to do about Sophie? Now I realize I'm a little late to the party, but I just wanted to put in my 2 cents on this whole cry for help by Sophie Gregoire Trudeau, who says she can't respond to all the requests for appearances and talks she gets from one worthy cause after another on account of being the popular, bilingual, and active wife of the Prime Minister that she is. Now it seems like everybody and their dog has weighed in on the Sophie question. One commentator claimed that Canadians just hate tall poppies and feel the need to cut them down. Tall poppies? What in the Christing hell is a tall poppy? Is this some kind of Ontario slang for the over 80 set? Well, thank God for Urban Dictionary and Google's all I can say. Sophie love, pancakes go in your mouth, not on the side of your head. What? It's not like she's going to be turning to me for fashion advice. Do you even own another shirt? Meanwhile, the fawning American press, who still wants hunky Justin Trudeau to be their boyfriend, has come rushing to Sophie's defense. In an article dripping with OMGs and WTF Canadas, yes, this is how seriously the world now takes Canada. They see the name Justin and they assume that the Canadian electorate are all believers. Time magazine chastised us for not being suitably grateful that we have rock stars in office. Well, see, here's the thing, we're not trying to elect the Kardashians to public office in this country. Even though it does seem that politicians and random celebrities do occupy more and more of the public space these days. Now I called this video Leave Sophie Alone because the whole should Canadians pay for more help and what role should the Prime Minister's spouse have business really isn't anything to do with Sophie at all. It's about whether Canada should have a First Lady. Don't worry, Sophie love, I'm not done with you yet, so just sit tight. Personally, I'm dead against Canada having an American-style First Lady. I mean, where do I even start? Maybe firstladies.org can be of some assistance here. They say that the role of a First Lady, or part of the traditional role at least, is to be hostess, household manager, decorator, and caretaker. Obviously, part of our job is to pay for domestic help for the Prime Minister. We don't expect our federal leader to run the country in between scrubbing toilets and cooking 3 meals a day. None of us will complain about paying for these things for 24 Sussex or wherever it is they're slumming it these days. Because if the Prime Minister doesn't have time to do it, who's going to do it? Wifey? Hubby? Now, one of the biggest complaints about Sophie in all of this is that she's out of touch with ordinary working mothers in Canada. But, her defenders say, she's not every working mom. Well, it's true that the average woman doesn't get 5 million invitations a day to speak at some charity or other. But I think one thing that rubbed people the wrong way is that there are lots of working parents out there who, on top of long hours working and parenting, also put in a lot of volunteer hours in the community. And basically they have 2 ways to do this. 1, they can learn to say no and work within the number of hours they have in a day. And 2, they can get some help. They can hire housekeepers, nannies, personal assistants. But whatever it is, they don't expect the taxpayers to pick up the bill for it, no matter how beneficial their services are to the community at large. But, say the Sophie fandom, she'll be representing Canadians at every function she speaks at. Yeah, I don't think so. What is certain is that she'll be representing her and her husband's brand, as well as her husband's political party. Now, I think the other part of feeling that Sophie is out of touch is her timing, which, to be fair, may have just been bad luck. Still, at the same time as Sophie was crying out for a team to help her organize her schedule, some 90,000 people were fleeing for their lives from the beast that ate Fort McMurray, sleeping on cots in school gyms and sportsplexes, wondering if their houses had been burned to the ground. Now, it's true that Alberta does only have about 4 million people, so in the national Oh no, you didn't. You did not just play the Western alienation card. Now, one of the complaints about Sophie that I think is totally bogus is this whole, well, she doesn't have a real job, or how hard can it be to look after her kids, or my personal favorite, suck it up, princess. What? I didn't actually call her a princess. Not exactly. What this basically is saying is that A, being a full-time stay-at-home parent isn't hard work, and B, these parents should be ashamed to ask for help. Using nannies and housekeepers makes you a princess. Unless, of course, you're a full-time stay-at-home dad, because we don't expect those guys to know how to do all that complicated housework stuff. But, you know, I don't think any of this is really about Sophie at all. I think it's more about women's glee in tearing each other down. Working women shitting on stay-at-home moms and vice versa. Now, other people are saying we shouldn't pay for a team for Sophie because the couple can afford to pay for it themselves. Okay, well, there's 2 parts to this. First is that Justin, at least, is privately wealthy. But this is irrelevant. Not all prime ministers are trust fund babies, and the question is, should we pay for it? The second part of this is that the Prime Minister makes a good salary. Well, yeah, sure he does. It's a hard job. I'm sure it's not all selfies and pandas. And also paying prime ministers good salaries is supposed to help guard against corruption. So whether they can pay for it or not shouldn't be the deciding factor. If we decide we want an American-style First Lady, we should have a separate pot set aside to pay for it. While we're on the subject, why did our neighbors to the south come up with this whole First Lady business in the first place? Well, the leader of a country is a busy person. They don't have time to run around to every ribbon cutting and awards ceremony. They need a helper. So, in Canada, the Governor-General is the person that we foist this job onto. Bonus points if you can name him. Some countries have monarchies. Other countries, like France and Ireland, have a president and a prime minister. One elected, and one the designated ribbon cutter. Well, in the States, they don't have any of that, so the president's wife got stuck with it. But an American-style First Lady is a pitfall we've so far managed to avoid, Mila Mulrooney notwithstanding. And good work, too, I say. If you ask me, and I know you haven't, but I'm not going to let that stop me. The First Lady is a total throwback. A be-aproned Betty Crocker mincing around the kitchen in stiletto heels and cone boobs, standing by her man. There's nothing wrong with being able to bake a mean chocolate chip cookie. The problem is when that is the sum total of everything you're valued for. Just ask Hillary Clinton. She was an educated professional woman who chafed hard at being forced into this atavistic 1950s mold of womanhood. Michelle Obama was smart. She learned from Hillary's failures. And look how well she succeeded. No one cares about her education or her brilliant legal career. All anyone cares about are her toned arms and her cute dresses. I say, let the Americans do what they want, but Canada should not go down this path. It's not about whether Canadians are so tight they refuse to part with an extra few $100,000 for extra help. It's what paying for that extra staff from the public purse would mean for Canada as a whole and for future prime ministerial spouses. Now, Sophie has chosen to be a stay-at-home mom. She had the freedom to make that choice. She could equally have chosen to continue her career and work outside the home. Part of the reason that she had that choice is precisely because the Prime Minister's spouse has no designated role. Now, if the spouse's role is officially expanded such that, well, they're expected to start behaving like a First Lady and do official duties, do you really think they would still have that choice? Sophie made a bizarre comment in the Le Soleil interview, saying that we need to revamp the old patriarchal ways and modernize the system. Well, I'm not sure I see how allowing the Prime Minister's spouse to choose their own career path is patriarchal. If anything, paying for a team of helpers from the public purse and establishing a First Lady role would entrench patriarchal ways. Sophie choosing to give up her career is one thing, but being forced to because of who her husband is another thing altogether. If you're still here, thank you so much for watching. I know it was a really long video. Please let me know in the comments what you think, like and subscribe, and I'll see you next time. Bye!